Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today we are kicking in the new year with a new deck tech. And really, it's the new year. You party on the new year. And what commander would love partying and loves partying like no other? It's Xenagos, God of Revels. Now, before we get started, there's some awesome cards in this deck. Xenagos himself is just amazing. If you want to get any of these cards, go ahead and click on our affiliate link down below with TCG Player. TCG Player is amazing. You can get anything at all that you're looking for there. Fancy foils, fancy promos. I love those myself. All there. Any cards you buy through that link, it'll go ahead and support the channel, help us get out more content and better content. We really, really appreciate the help. Now, Xenagos, like I said, we want to party in the new year. Let's party with Xenagos with hopefully a touch less murder and psychoticness. But nonetheless, it's on theme. It's got the right idea of what we're trying to do. So Xenagos is just a good time. Xenagos is 3, a red and a green for one of the indestructible gods. There's been a few cycle of gods at this point. This was from the cycle that was indestructible, and they're not creatures until you have a certain devotion. So Xenagos needs 7 devotion to green and red before it's a creature. And for you don't want it to be a creature, indestructible enchantment is so hard to remove. So essentially, if you don't let him be a creature, it's just going to stick around. Very, very few cards are going to exile target enchantment or exile enchantment, so it's got a real good chance just to stay there. And for 5 mana, it's not that expensive to begin with. Now, obviously, if it's just an indestructible enchantment, we don't care about that. We need a broken effect, and Xenagos brings that and then some. Xenagos is going to pump your creatures. This is a power matters deck. Essentially, at the beginning of combat, on every one of your turns, target creature you control gets +X, where X is its power, and haste. Now, haste is so powerful. This is a deck that's all about huge, scary creatures smacking people in the face. We're obviously going to want to add some evasion in, some of that stuff. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it's just a good time. You get down massive creatures. You can benefit like crazy from these huge powers you're going to get, and the haste. One of the biggest feel bads you can have with dropping a huge threat at the table, other than it being countered, is having to wait a whole cycle of the table to attack with it. You play this massive, scary thing, and then you just got to sit there and just hope no one kills it. Yeah. Xenagos, that's not a problem. You give it haste, you make it even scarier, and you smash people in the face. And I don't know if your opponents are going to feel the same way, but this is how we like to party and bring in the new year. So this deck is all about creatures. We always want to have scary creatures to be able to give Xenagos' trigger to. Xenagos is great, but if you just don't have creatures on board, what are you going to do with this? This is a very creature-heavy deck. One of my favorite things about Xenagos is it's hard to mess up a Xenagos build. You just put in ramp, put in big scary creatures and have fun. That's really all it is. And that's my favorite part about it. You just get to pick your favorite big stompy threats. A lot of these cards are 1, pretty cheap to buy, and 2, stuff that doesn't see play in many other decks. These big scary creatures that these might be that bulk that you get in drafts or unlimited that are just never realistic to play in other decks. This is the home for them. They'll feel right at home, and your opponents might undervalue how threatening these things are until they're hitting them in the face. So looking at these creatures, I'm going to pick some of my favorite big stompy threats, and you guys can just slot in your favorites. The first creature I'm going to get into should be zero surprise. It's probably #1 on every list, website, EDH, rec, everything for Xenagos, and it's a Tarka World Render. Tarka is ridiculous in this deck. It's this huge 6-power dragon with evasion. It's got flying and trample, and on top of that, whenever any of your dragons attack, they get double strike. Now, we're running some dragons. We're not running a ton, but we don't care. He's a dragon. Tarka's a dragon. That's all that matters. So when you attack with Xenagos, if you put Xenagos trigger on, it's a 6-power. That Xenagos trigger gives it 12 power and gives it haste. So now it's a 12-power flying, trample, haste, double striker. This is going to hit somebody for potentially 24 damage out of nowhere if they don't have a flying blocker. And that happens plenty. This is knock somebody's life total in half out of nowhere with Xenagos. This is just a ridiculously powerful card and a staple in Xenagos. The next card I want to talk about is Atali. Atali Primal Storm is an insane card, and it's one of those cards that have to have haste. I played a little bit of an Atali deck a while back, and it felt bad. If you got it out without haste, you were just terrified. You're like, it's going to get removed. It's 6 men. I'm not even going to get a trigger off of it. It's got no protection, nothing. But with Xenagos, it's always going to have haste, and it's even going to get bigger. So all of a sudden, it turns into a 12 with haste, and you're just casting everybody's things. With all this stuff, gets silly, and Atali is just perfect in this deck. And this is an example of just one of those big stompy cards that can find homes in some decks, but with that haste, it makes its effect just so much more powerful. The next card I'm going to look at is Grothama. Grothama is insane. Grothama is so powerful in this deck. Obviously, Commander, Grothama is a scary card to play because any one of your opponents could take advantage and draw just a ton of cards off of it. But bro, like, we are playing massive things at all times, so the chances of us being able to just swing in and draw 15 cards off of it are way higher than our opponents. It's just insane what you can do with Grothama in this deck. Not to mention, basically, it's worst case is you have a 20 power creature swinging with haste with Xenagos. Like, okay, I'll take that as the downside. But on the plus, if you get this out and have your Atarka, for example, swinging, you might just draw 24 cards off of that. That is dumb. It is insane. And Grothama is just, it's a high variability card. But to me, it's all about what Commander is, and it's fun. It's a little bit random and a whole lot of a good time. Now, I'm going to get into some of the bigger beaters later in the game-winning stuff. There's a couple that are just two of my personal favorites. We'll get into that. But these are just some examples of big, scary creatures that we can play and inflict lots of damage on our opponents. But one of the most important things in Xenagos is being able to supplement these big beaters with utility creatures that either take advantage of it or that are going to help you get to these strategies faster. It's very easy to stuff this deck with just massive beaters only, but then you get in a situation where you either don't have enough mana to cast them, you have all these big 7-8 drops in your hands, you can only do one a turn. You want utility, and you want different creatures that are going to take advantage of this in order to help you get the strategy going faster and keep it being more resilient. A great example of this is going to be Champion of Rhodas. Elvish Piper, I don't have it personally, I need to put it in here, but I ran Champion of Rhodas, similar effects, where you can just cheat massive creatures out. This is great if you're not being able to ramp at the speed that you want to. This is great if late game you need to get 2 threats out in one turn. It's a great utility creature that's going to let you get what you need out. Not to mention you can give it haste with Xenagos so you can have it that first turn, get that effect you want, and get that bigger threat into play. The next two is just great ways to ramp, and it's with cards like Somberwald Sage and Selvala Heart of the Wilds. Now obviously Selvala is very expensive, so not slotting it in, completely understandable, but cards like this, you want to be able to ramp, and being able to ramp with creatures is great. There's a lot of cards in this deck that care about the number of creatures that you have, they care about casting creatures, which we'll get into, and we can give creatures haste. So having these mana dorks is great, because if late game, again, Xenagos is probably going to stick around. These are much better when you can play them, and then worst case, have to give them haste with Xenagos and activate them in the same turn to get other stuff out. Mana Dorks are great, and normally in green, where you can go very heavy sorcery-based ramp, it's good in this deck to slot in some Mana Dorks because we do care about our creatures. And the last utility creature I really want to talk about is Heart Piercer Manicore. I love this. It itself, you can hit people in the face with. With Xenagos, it's 8 power. So it starts at 4, you can double it. It's obviously not ideal, we want much higher than that, but that's its downside again. Its upside is killing someone, because you get some of these creatures and you're doubling their power. We can get into situations where we're doubling the double, which we'll see. And in that situation, Heart Piercer Manicore can enter, just essentially fling a creature at someone and take someone out. Great against propaganda type effects. Great against token decks that have chump blockers for days, or decks with just insane numbers of big creatures themselves. You might see another stompy deck and not be able to sneak anything through. This is a great way to do that, especially late game when life totals get low. This can just get somebody out of the game for you. Speaking of enablers, we're going to go straight into the Planeswalkers, and in a great enabling Planeswalker for this deck, and it's Domri, Anarch of Bolas. Domri is phenomenal because it makes sure we can't get our stuff countered. It ramps us when we plus it, and then we can't get countered. Not being able to be countered is huge in this deck. This is a deck where we have some 7, 8, and more drops, and we don't want to waste that mana because people know we're threatening, and when you try to drop a threat like some of the ones we'll get to, and it's countered, all of a sudden, people know you got gas in your deck. They want to attack you, and you don't even get that big creature. It's just all for naught. Counter spells are always going to be cheaper than the big threats we're playing, so having them be uncounterable is a must. Now with the artifacts, there's 2 I gotta mention. The first one's going to be Quicksilver Amulet. Another way to cheat stuff out, and this is kind of a little sub-theme of the deck, is getting these massive scary creatures into play. This you can do it at instant speed and not have to pay the mana for it. 4 mana, tap it, get something crazy into play. We don't really run many Eldrazi or anything like that care about casting effects. Now, if you go heavier into the Eldrazi, which you obviously can with Xenagos, they're great with Xenagos, this might be a little bit less great because then your high-end curve stuff you want to cast. But in this deck, where I kind of went Eldrazi-less and went with some other big personal favorites of mine, it's perfect because I don't care about cast effects. I just want these big, scary things thrown into play. And the next one I'm going to talk about is Stronic Resonator. Now, by no means am I a math genius, but when you use this, you're going to quadruple the power of your creatures. And you know what that means? That just means your creatures get too big. It means they're too strong. They're going to be way too much to deal with. Because that Atarka example, like I said before, which I keep getting back to, but he is one of the all-stars in the deck and one of the most stereotypical cards you're going to see in the deck. Atarka starts at 6, get to 12. And all of a sudden, if you use Stronic Resonator, it gets to 24 double striking. That is one-shotting someone from 48 life if you get this card out. That is just dumb. It is ridiculous. And it doesn't cost much mana to do it. This is a terrifying card in this deck. And if you get it out and no one removes it, someone's probably going to get one shot. Because at that point, even if they're a beginning life total, you got quite a few creatures that can just take them out. Now with the enchantments, I mentioned Creatures Matters cards, so Elemental Bond and Guardian Project are going to do a great job of helping us draw cards, replenish our hand by casting creatures, because like I said, we do have that focus on creatures. We also run Rhythm of the Wild, which is just doing the same thing that Domri's doing. We don't want our stuff countered, plus it doubles and gives us redundancy to make sure we can give things haste. Rhythm of the Wild is just ridiculously strong in so many decks, but it is absolutely perfect in this deck and make sure we get our things out and make sure we can get things haste. It's even great with our commander, because our commander, when you cast it, is still considered a creature until it hits the battlefield. So an uncounterable Xenagos, kind of great. But the other enchantments I want to put emphasis on are cards I don't see quite as often that I think are just bonkers. They're ridiculous. And the first one's Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators is phenomenal. If you don't play it in any decks, put it in some decks. Whenever your opponents cast cards, you just get to flip the top card, and if it's a creature, it just gets thrown into play. Yeah, it's as ridiculous as it sounds, but in a deck that runs as many creatures as we do, it's going to be a hit more often than not, and some of them are going to be cheating huge mana costs. Again, not heavy on Eldrazi at all, so we don't care that we're not casting creatures. Our benefits don't come on cast, it just comes from having the huge threats out. This is a great job of that. And another one is Rancor. Rancor is a beautiful card. It is, when it goes to the graveyard, it comes back to your hand, and it's just a constant trample enabler. It gets a little buff too. This allows evasion for some of our creatures that might not have it, and because it just keeps coming back, we can just guarantee that everything's going to be able to trample through, which is huge when you got 20, 30 power creatures or whatever ridiculous number they're at. You need trample, you need evasion. The last enchantment I'm going to get into is probably the most powerful one in the deck, and it's Greater Good. Greater Good is just completely game-winning in this deck. When you pump some of these creatures with Xenagos, it's very easy to get to 10, 15, 20 power. And then all of a sudden, you can, swing with it, do your damage, and at this, second main phase, sack it to Greater Good, draw as many cards as you want, discard 3. That is insane. It essentially just means play a threat, swing with it, refuel, more than refuel. At that point, you're just drawing like a third of your deck, whatever dumb number you get to. And then, all of a sudden, you're ready for next turn to drop even more threats. It is just a ridiculous card in so many creature-based decks, but your power gets so big. 1, the discard 3 just doesn't matter. 2, because you still get to swing with those creatures, you just get so much benefit, and it is just perfect in Xenagos. Looking at the sorceries, this is where we really get into the powers matter stuff. Traverse the Outlands and Rishkar's expertise they're just ridiculous. They're insane. This is where we get to just ridiculous ramp, ridiculous card draw. It's very easy to just dump out all the basics in our entire deck in a turn with Traverse the Outlands, with how big some of these creatures get. They're just really, really powerful ramp spells that are so at home. You also have something like Hunter's Prowess that is going to allow us to draw a bunch of cards based on damage that we get through, and power is still very relevant with that card because some of the powers are so big that when we give our creature trample, we're guaranteeing a large amount of combat damage coming through, and therefore a lot of card draw. Outside of that, it's also where we're going to see most of our ramp. Lots and lots of sorcery-based ramp, in addition to our mana doors, because we got to ramp hard, ramp fast to get some of these big threats out. And the last card I want to mention is a card I don't see played nearly enough. I hear DJ from Jumbo Commander talk about it. He's really the only person I've really seen get into how ridiculous this card is, and it's Disrupt Decorum. Starting off, if you don't play this card, play this card. It is so powerful. It is such an overperformer, and it goes all your opponent's creatures. And really what that does is, 1, they all have to attack each other, so damage gets through, which is one thing. But 2, all the shields are down. Shields are down in a deck like this where we have multiple creatures that can one-shot people. Yeah, that's all you need to just take somebody or multiple people out of the game. And it's so hard to deal with. If they don't counter it, they are kind of just screwed. Board wipes don't help. Our commander is an indestructible enchantment. The creatures that we play get haste because of that, so we don't need to have them out already. So if they board wipe, we just have another threat to play. It gets scary. If you disrupt a quorum and they don't have a way to counter it, it could just be in game and there might not be much at all that they can do about it. Looking at the instance, short and sweet, Beast Within. I don't care what deck you're running. If it has green, Beast Within needs to be in there. It's permanent removal. It is beautiful. You could slot some other things. I went very, very intense into the big stompy aspect of the deck. So instant speed stuff, while it's good, I'm more just trying to step on people than interact at instant speed. Looking at the lands, pretty basic rule mana base. Now, there's one card that I actually don't put in many decks that other people usually do, and that is Reliquary Tower. I find in most decks, you just don't need it. You don't want an extra colorless mana source. And sometimes when you get to 10, 11 cards, just having the card selection is fine. You don't need to worry about having a maximum hand size. Unless a deck is like this and you can be drawing 20 or 30 cards in a turn. If you have that much cards around your deck, you want it in there because, yeah, draw 10 or 11, discarding a few is not a big deal. But when you get a turn, even just for the purpose of saving time, if you get a turn where you're drawing 30 cards, 20 cards in a turn, you want Reliquary Tower in there. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is Zero Surprise. Best land in the deck, hands down, and it's Kessig Wolfrun. Kessig Wolfrun is insane in any deck. This is a great, great way to, one, be able to finish people off. Two, at the very least, they can give trample. And three, in a deck that ramps this hard, it's a great, great late game payoff. Kessig Wolfrun with your commander are the type of cards that can literally take one of your mana dorks and kill somebody. Late game, you just pump a whole bunch of mana into it. Even if you got a mana dork, make that. Even if you just get it to like a 6/6 or a 7/7, all of a sudden your commander kicks in, and yeah, now you got a giant trampling hasty creature that was just a little nothing, and with those two cards, it gets silly. It is a phenomenal card. Yeah, in any Gruul deck, I love it because in Gruul, it's got green, you're gonna ramp. Late game, this is a great sneaky way to just take someone out. So that's going to do it for all the categories. Now we get into the game-winning step. How are we about to win the game in this deck? And it's no surprise we're smacking people in the face, but what are we going to smack people with? That is the question. So the first way to win the game in this deck, we're just going to call it raw damage, because we are just getting damage through a bunch of people in the face. And I think no card just represents that better in this deck, or in general, than Pathbreaker Ibex. This is essentially the Craterhoof for Go Tall decks, and I don't see it played a lot because usually its effect isn't immediate. It's not an ETB, it's when it attacks, and what it does is it pumps your whole team by whatever your biggest power is. Not to mention, it also gives them trample, trample is important. And again, in a lot of decks you play this, maybe you have to wait a cycle of the table, it's not ideal, but because of Xenagos you can give it haste. Now ideally, you want to be able to give something else the Xenagos trigger because then it gets insanely big and then you also get this trigger. But it's really not going to matter. You put the trigger on the Pathbreaker, swing with it, even if your biggest creature is a 6/6 or a 7/7. Yeah, your whole team's getting plus 6/6, plus 7/7, and trample on top of it. Yeah, it gets silly because we have so many, our creatures are naturally big. We have so many big creatures already. The Xenagos trigger is gravy for a lot of it. So Pathbreaker is our deck's version of Craterhoof. And if it gets even to the better scenario where, it did stick around, or we have a different way to give it haste, and we can put that Xenagos trigger on something else, yeah, try pumping the whole team by plus 15, plus 15, plus 20, plus 20. And yeah, things get dumb. It's essentially the equivalent of dropping a Craterhoof with a board full of tokens. It ends games. I don't see it played a ton because it is way less reliable than Craterhoof. But in this deck, it's going to have that same type of game-ending effect. Alright, so obviously we can stomp people in the face, but how else might we want to kill people? Now, I know how I want to kill people in literally every game of Commander. Like I said, we're trying to party in this deck. We're trying to have a good time, and no card is going to represent a good time. Better than Blightsteel, Colossus. Blightsteel is at home in this deck, 100% at home in this deck. Because it's already this big 11/11 trample infect threat, and it's always the same when you drop a Blightsteel. The whole table looks at each other. One, do they have a counterspell? If not, two, what does everybody have to do to work together to make sure it is not there by the time your next turn comes around? Fine and dandy, but in this deck, it's a whole lot scarier because Xenagos, it's going to be there. We have a lot of can't counter creature effects. Now all of a sudden, this Blightsteel is a 22/22 trample infect haste. Yeah, I don't care what anybody has on board. It's almost always guaranteed a one-shot at that point, and it's just so big, so scary, so Phyrexian. Yeah, there's no better way for me to win a game in Commander than hitting somebody with a Blightsteel. I don't think I can enjoy anything else more. And having it just be a 22-22 and with all the haste, it is perfect and my second favorite way to win the game in the deck. And it might be a shocker that I didn't pick Blightsteel as my number one favorite way to win the game, and it might be because the number one way actually works great with Blightsteel too, and that is Chandra's Ignition. Chandra's Ignition is silly. One, it acts as a board wipe. It's going to take your creature with the biggest power you're going to pick, and it deals it damage equal to its power to every other creature, and then to each opponent. Now, it does include your creatures, so it does mean that you're going to kill all your creatures too, but a lot of times you don't care. You get that big 15-15, 20-20 creature, you just smack all your opponents in the face and destroy all their creatures. If it happens to be a Blightsteel, it just immediately ends the game. This is such a fun card, and in this type of deck, it is so important. I mentioned Heart-Piercing Mana Core before, and in big stompy decks, and in decks that are really just big, dumb fun, stuff can get difficult. Sometimes you can't get in for an attack. Sometimes people have too many blockers. Sometimes people have fog effects. There's just times where combat damage isn't going to do it. And in a deck that's so focused on combat damage, having a bomb like this that can just end a game with a sorcery dealing non-combat damage is silly. Chandra's Ignition is just such a fun way to watch the whole table blow up. And specifically if you use it on a Blightsteel, yeah, there is no more satisfying of a two-card combo in my book than a Blightsteel and Chandra's Ignition. It is big, it is dumb, and it is a very good time. So that's going to do it for this week's Deck Tech. I hope y'all had a great holiday season. I hope y'all reveled a little bit like Xenagos, again, minus the murder, and had a good time. Xenagos is a great card. I'm really hoping that we see some... I think he died in the story. I'm not super great on all the story stuff. I think he died. Maybe he'll get resurrected. I really hope we see him again or something cool, big and dumb like this in the new Theros set. Super excited for it. Speaking of new Theros, spoilers are starting to kind of trickle out at this point, so we're going to have some really cool deck text for those spoilers as soon as they start coming, so get excited about that. We haven't had some spoilers in a little bit. I'm kind of getting withdrawals. We got so used to back-to-back-to-back spoilers. It's been like, I don't know, we had like a solid month off, and I'm starting to get a little antsy. I'm ready to see the next set, so I'm very excited. And as always, a huge shout out and thank you to all the patrons. We love y'all so much. We really appreciate the help. It's really helps us to be able to, make these videos and everything. So we really do appreciate it. So many crazy things to come as 2020, it looks like it is setting up to be the year of Commander. But until then, I will see y'all next time.